together again. Archer and Feldman, from Los Angeles, with Rob Archer and Charles Feldman.
Welcome to the second episode of Archer and Feldman. I'm Rob Archer.
And that must mean, by elimination, I'm Charles Feldman.
There's only two of us here, so yeah.
So I have to be right about that.
Yeah. You have no chance of being wrong.
That's pretty good, because in most things in life, there's a fairly good chance, right?
Yeah. You got a 50-50 chance of yes or no, black or white, so.
For this, anyway, I can assert with high confidence.
Yes. Today's topic is good night and good luck, CBS News Radio. CBS News Radio goes silent. The date, Charles, is May 22nd. That is on a Friday. So does that mean that it ends at midnight at the beginning of May 22nd, or is it going through the day on May 22nd? We have no clarification on this.
No, but at the end of the day or the end of the night, what really matters is that it will forever be gone, and that is not an insignificant development. I mean, CBS Radio was the foundation for what came after, which of course is CBS and the CBS television network. And CBS Radio News, in many ways, is responsible for broadcast journalism in the form that you and I certainly knew growing up and entering the business. And I dare say it won't be the model in the future, unfortunately, but it was very much the role model for all of us.
Now, and I think that it was also set the terms and the tone for TV broadcast journalism coming after it, because the idea had been set with CBS News Radio. And the thing I find most interesting about it, CBS Radio got started 100 years ago, but the World News Roundup, the show, actually began as we were heading up into World War II. When Germany annexed Austria. It was, I think it was the night before that actually happened. And Edward R. Murrow was there in 1938 and debuted World News Roundup, the longest running news show in America, in history, I think.
I was listening to some of those clips. It was actually at a time before Edward R. Murrow started using the R. I think he just signed off by Edward.
Edward Murrow.
And, the story there was that he had been sent by Bill Paley, who, of course, was the guy that really invented the CBS network, and was therefore instrumental in the creation of the modern CBS News. He had sent Edward Murrow, who I think was in his late 20s at the time. I think he was about 28 or 29 years old. And he was sent to Europe, to Austria, to actually look for talent. I'm not quite sure why he was going there, but he was looking for voices, I guess, new voices that they could use on the air. And he, being as smart and as astute as he was, saw what was happening with Adolf Hitler, who was about to invade Austria and take it over, annex it, and started doing broadcasts himself from Austria. So it was really not only something that was new for the American public listening to their radios, it was actually new for Edward, soon to be Edward R. Murrow, who was really just beginning his on-air career.
This is Edward Murrow speaking from Vienna. It's now nearly 2:30 in the morning, and Herr Hitler has not yet arrived. No one seems to know just when he will get here, but most people expect him sometime after 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
And this was the night before, earth-shaking events. And what struck me about that was, CBS News, whether radio or television, had this old school, we are here to report, not to give an opinion. But that said, it was very clear that what Murrow was talking about was a warning about Hitler and a warning about fascism. And I think Murrow rightly saw, as many people did, that that what was happening in Europe was leading to what was going to be chaos and barbarism. There were already reports of oppression of Jews in Germany, and that was very much a big concern already at the time.
Well, it was opinion, but it was opinion grounded very heavily in fact, which is different in many respects from what we have in our sort of modern day media ecosystem. And in fact, Murrow displayed that again years later with then Senator McCarthy and McCarthyism. And again, was it his opinion on how dastardly Senator McCarthy, his impact was on American democracy? Yes, it was his opinion, but he armed his opinion, if you will, heavily with facts. So it was fact-based opinion, and that, I would argue, is actually the role of the proper role of a journalist. If you leave that part out of the equation, then that makes a journalist nothing more than a stenographer. And the difference in my mind between a stenographer who just copies down everything that people say and what somebody like Edward R. Murrow did was he was connecting the dots. He was taking those facts and saying, here's how it all adds up. And in the case of Hitler's annexation of Austria, in the case years later of Senator Joseph McCarthy, what he was concluding was that these were incredibly, in different ways, dangerous people.
And what Murrow did also, speaking of McCarthy, he gave McCarthy an episode of the show to respond. So yes, Murrow had taken a position of moral clarity in that what McCarthy is doing is wrong, but at the same time, he did not silence McCarthy or give him a chance to explain himself in his own words. And I think that is where the old school fair, but there is moral clarity, fair but not neutral, and there is a difference in being neutral. The old example, Charles, of one guy says it's raining outside and the other one says it isn't. Well, we look out the window and go, no, actually it's raining, and we're not giving an opinion. We are reporting the facts as we see them.
That's right. You also mentioned about how, in some ways, many ways, those days of the early days of CBS Radio News was the sort of model upon which years later network television news was built. And what's really interesting is because of the technology and the development of technology, CBS Radio was doing worldwide live reporting well before television news was capable of doing that because of the technological disadvantage. In the early days of network television news, CBS, ABC, NBC, they had to, and when I say early days, I'm going back not as far as really the 60s and 70s, so it wasn't that long ago. But they had to, if they wanted to get a report from overseas, they had to send a camera crew with film. The film had to be developed. It had to be flown back either to New York or to some other place, maybe London, developed, because they didn't have the satellite technology to do what we do now so easily, which is live reporting and hopscotching around the globe. Well, CBS Radio News was doing live reporting from around the world decades earlier, and it was because of Edward R. Murrow and what they used to call in those days the Murrow Gang, other reporters who were in other cities like Paris and
names we came to know later on.
We all came to know Charles Collingwood, people like that. And radio was able to do it because it didn't need satellites. They were able to do live telephone, really, coaxial cable. They were able to do live telephone reports. So the World News Roundup, which is, and when it ends, the end of the week, next week or this week, depending when you watch this, 23rd, right? Is that it of May?
22nd.
22nd
is the date. Though we haven't locked it down whether is that midnight on the 22nd or midnight on the 23rd. We don't know.
But when CBS Radio News ends, so too will be the world's longest running, continuously produced daily world newscast, which is the CBS World News Roundup, which started at the very cusp of World War II and started by CBS Radio News. So this is not an insignificant loss to the fabric of what is America.
You know, we saw, even in the modern era with technology and satellites, we saw when KNX in Los Angeles covered the wildfires in January of 25, we saw that it was much easier and much faster to get a microphone in there than it was to get a camera crew. I mean, there's more equipment to lug, but we got a guy, and in some cases, just people calling in on cell phones. And, TV can use cell phones too, but it's more immediate when it's an audio thing and you're hearing it in the audio format. And we were talking about CBS Radio News going away. And I always go back to the top of the hour chime and the sting. And, I was at KNX for 10 years. You were there for longer than I was. So that was an hourly part of my life for 10 years, that sting. I mean, it was so ingrained in my consciousness that, not hearing it was actually kind of an absence when I didn't hear it.
Can you hum it?
No, I can't, because I am as musical as a melting ice cube. And I don't know what that means, but that's how musical I am.
What that means either, but it
yeah.
sounded.
But and speaking of the sting, there was a tradition with that as well, because that sting was there from the early days in some form or another. It was those 5 notes, and that top of the hour chime that just signals, okay, a new hour is about to begin. We've got new news, maybe old news too. And it was a reset. It was a reset of developments. It was a great starting place. My wife used to tell me how she would tune in to the radio at the top of the hour. She wanted to hear that CBS News chime, hear the national and world roundup of news, and then that's when she chose to tune in at the top of the hour. And that's when she locked in.
And you considered this normal behavior?
Well, it's hard to say what's normal behavior for my wife, because she is, after all, still married to me, which is odd. Very I think a sign of some mental conditions that need to be looked at.
But the puzzle here, and people who are bean counters, accountants, will say there's no puzzle. It just CBS wasn't making the kind of money it wanted to make from radio news, so it had to go away. But you look at some of the other things that it had. I think I may be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. I think that it has about 700 radio
700, yeah, 700
affiliates. They're not owned, of course, by CBS, but
no. But they took the CBS Radio News product,
right? And you can't help but wonder how any business that has that kind of presence across the United States, 700 radio stations in markets from New York to San Francisco to Los Angeles to smaller places to towns that have radio stations whose call letters I'm sure that we would never even recognize because they're that small. You wonder how that business model can't work. And that makes one wonder whether for some reason they just didn't want it to work.
I think it was a matter of that. It was not, my opinion is not that CBS News Radio itself as an entity was losing money. It was that the overall scheme of things, CBS News and CBS were losing money because of what's happening with broadcasting in general, TV and radio. So when the bean counters look at that, it's like, well, we're not going to cut out TV news. What can we cut out? Oh, radio news. We can let that go away because, radio's dying anyway, or so they keep saying, even though I don't think it's true, not yet. But yeah, I think it was a matter of that. CBS News Radio by itself, I think, was still a money-making proposition because you and I both know plenty of ads they were selling. All the ads spots were filled up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and clearance on 700 stations. I mean, you tell an ad client that, hey, when this commercial airs, it airs on 700 stations across the country, and in some cases across the world. So, I don't see how the radio division was losing money. I think it was just an overall, well, we got to cut some heads and heads will roll, and radio heads are the easiest ones to cut off.
Well, one can never fully discount the notion that the people making that kind of decision to get rid of something like CBS Radio News, they could just be stupid people. I mean, there are stupid people in every line of work. You have stupid people who run supermarkets, and you have stupid people who run hospitals. So it's not beyond the possibility that the people who were making the decision to end CBS Radio News are just fundamentally stupid people.
Well, look at what's happening with CBS TV News right now. Tony DeCopel was going to go to China with the NBC and the ABC anchors, but they neglected to get him a visa in time. So they sent him to Taiwan. The first night of the broadcast, they had the little glitch where somebody had a medical emergency and apparently fell over, passed out, but he's okay, is what we hear. But bigger than that, the hotel where DeCopel was anchoring from on that first night there didn't want him there talking about the issue of Taiwan and China. Don't discuss that here. So they had to pick up location. So that goes into the whole planning aspect. Who was in charge of the simple logistics of that and could not get it worked out in time? Couldn't get DeCopel a visa. And I got to tell you, for me, I don't envy Tony DeCopel, because once this is all done and the ratings for evening news are they are literally at the bottom of the network barrel right now. Where does he go from that? He's always going to be stained with this unprofessional approach to running a network news division. And that goes back, I think, to Barry Weiss.
Well, and as I suggested before, could it be that all the people making these really bad decisions are, I don't know, stupid people?
Stupid people.
That may be the theme, by the way, of this episode of our podcast, which is that, stupid people make stupid decisions and they run stupid companies, and they're attracted to it. It's like a magnet. They see a position, these people who are, endlessly failing upwards, and they go, oh, there's a position. It sounds pretty dumb to me. I'm the perfect candidate for it. So they get that job, and then they follow through with very stupid decisions. And it happens not only at the network level, but it happens at the local radio network.
Yeah. And it's also putting people in positions of power where they don't have any education or experience in that world at all. Barry Weiss never ran a TV division. She had basically a newsletter sheet that was a favorite of the MAGA crowd. And so there she was bumped up. She's running the network news division at CBS with no experience of doing that. And I think watching what's happening now, and she got rid of so many people, so many smart people. So she was not surrounded by smart people anymore who could go, oh, well, you got to make sure Tony gets a visa to go to China if you want him from there. And we got to make sure it's okay where he's broadcasting from. We have to get permission. And I think now you see what the effect is. And we honestly, Charles, you and I, we see this in national federal government right now.
So where do you think, once CBS signs off, the end of May, I'm going to, since we're not sure exactly the time and date, but 22nd, 23rd, whatever it is. So what do you think happens then? Do people who listen to it in those 700 some odd stations that we just mentioned, do they just kind of shrug their shoulders and go, oh, well, there's another thing that's gone out of our lives?
Yeah.
Or do they react in some way? And should they? I mean, I have a suggestion, which is that if people who have been fans, and look, not everybody is, and not, nothing is something. I had a news director once years ago in New York City at a TV station that I was working at, and we had a discussion about how some people like certain things and some. And he said, I thought it was a very simplistic answer, but it's true. He said, that's why they created vanilla and chocolate syrup, Some people like vanilla and some people like chocolate. And the people who like vanilla are not going to like chocolate, and the chocolate people aren't going to like vanilla syrup. So he said that's why, you need to have a lot of different things on the air. We were talking about a particular show we were doing, and the need to have a more of a mix in topics. So the question is, so what I would propose is that the people who are fans of CBS Radio News in those markets, those 700 individual radio markets, if they want to express themselves, then perhaps the best way to do it is a boycott of CBS. I mean, you don't have to watch CBS television programming. And
No, you don't. And not only that, people were dumping their Paramount Plus subscriptions as well. Way back when Barry Weiss first took over, and it was clear that Tony DeCopel and the network Evening News was going to be a lot more MAGA friendly than it was before.
Right. So maybe that's the solution. Maybe people often feel that they don't have a voice, and I reject that. And I've had this beef about a lot of things. For example, you go into a restaurant, and it's $50 for a hamburger, and my response, and people say, "Oh, the restaurant shouldn't charge that." They shouldn't. But my comeback is, but it's not the restaurant's fault. Ultimately, if people refused to pay the $50 for the hamburger, eventually the restaurant would either go out of business or lower the price of the hamburger. So people have to shoulder a certain amount of responsibility, like airlines. I mean, people say, oh, the airlines shouldn't charge for pillows and they shouldn't charge for this. I agree. Then don't fly those airlines. Take your money and go elsewhere. So in the case of CBS Radio, if you think that it was a bad and stupid decision to axe a historic radio news service that has served this country very well for about 100 years, if you think that was a bad decision, if you don't agree, then the response shouldn't be, there's nothing I could do about it, because that is absolutely wrong. There is something you can do about it. Boycott CBS. Don't watch their stupid TV shows. Don't listen to anything else that they pump.
And I think the viewers of Evening News are already doing that. Looking at the ratings are just going down and down. So people have switched over to I think the last figures I saw, mostly ABC and NBC. And speaking of the radio part, I know that with some of the radio program directors I've talked to who were carrying CBS News radio, they say that most of them have told me they were just going to replace it with ABC News Radio. ABC News Radio is a valuable service. They're very good at what they do, but they didn't have the same infrastructure that CBS News Radio had built in. They were better at providing, audio and sound cuts. So I think ABC News Radio will have to up its game as far as providing those great top or bottom of the hour breaking news updates that they sent out to radio stations.
Yeah, but I'm a strong believer, though, Rob, that one of the fundamental pillars of a capitalist society is that competition is good, and that nothing good ever comes from decreasing competition. And so when you take CBS out of the picture, I'm not so sure that those other places, ABC mentioned, pumps out news, audio bites and things like that. NBC has an audio service as well. WABC actually in New York is forming some new thing. I forgot what it's called.
Red Apple Media.
Yeah, okay, Red Apple Media, to try to fill this void that's going to be left by CBS. But if capitalism works the way I think it works, I actually don't think it's going to lead to these other entities upping their game. I think it's going to lead to them saying, well, we don't have that competition. We don't have to do this or do that. We don't have to send a reporter to some far off place to get a story. Nobody else is doing it. No, we don't have to compete with anybody. So
we're providing a crappy service. Where else are you going to go?
yeah. I mean, and look at local radio stations. There was as radio station. It used to be in a major market, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Boston. You would have a handful of radio stations with various formats, music formats, talk formats, that would all have radio news departments. And they might have 3 people, they might have 10 people, they might have only 1 person, but they had radio news departments. As that competition for economic and other reasons started to fade away, what we've seen over the years is not that any one station says, oh, well, now there's a void, we're going to start hiring tons of people. No, everybody goes, okay, we can get away with doing a lot less.
Mm-hmm. When my first radio station in a very small town in Belglade, Florida, on the FM side, we had no coverage, a very small outfit, but we had a news guy in the morning. So there was a news department there who went out, and he would go down to the police station, pick up the police logs or whatever, and he would do what he could. And then when I went to Stuart, Florida, which is a slightly bigger market but still small, we had a 2 or 3 person news team, a news division there, and had an anchor in the morning and an anchor in the afternoon. And then when they could afford it, they had a 3rd person who would go out and get live reports or record reports from the street. So, I mean, news was important, and we're talking the 80s, the 1980s. Radio was still a force to be reckoned with, and it was still major media. But you're right. Now, looking at some of these small town local stations, they can't afford a news guy. They can't afford, certainly not a whole news department. So they've got to get that material from somewhere else. And increasingly it's coming from syndicated sources, of people who are not in that community and who don't know that town and can't sound like they know what they're talking about.
Well, look, with local stations, it's no great, excuse me, no great. I'm choked up that CBS is.
I know, I can tell you. Yeah. Sadness.
It's very great, greatly impacts. But with local stations, it's no secret. Radio, TV stations get a lot of their news from newspapers. But now there aren't any newspapers.
Newspapers are gone.
So, and the newspapers, let's face it, have done traditionally most of the heavy lifting, whether it's in New York or Los Angeles or, almost anywhere. Newspapers always had enough people to go and cover the town hall meetings, the school board meetings. If they had a bigger budget, they could also do some investigative work in looking at city or municipal state governments. But as more and more newspapers have folded and those journalists have been laid off, it leaves a real vacuum that the sad irony is local TV and radio simply can't fill anymore because they too have been laying off people. They too have been shrinking their operations. They too no longer have people all over the state or the budget to send people to the far corners of the U.S., let alone their own state, to cover news. So we are left increasingly with a news vacuum. And yes, you do have public broadcasting that's doing fairly well in many communities. But there again, competition is the thing that makes news better. Lack of competition never, ever makes it better, ever.
That's absolutely right. And the big papers too. Look at what happened with the Washington Post not that long ago. I think a number of people just suddenly cut in one day. Hardly any resources left to go out and get actual reporting now. And that's happening to the big newspapers who have access and the infrastructure. They can do things digitally and put up LA Times has a little streaming thing on their page when you go there where they're providing programming. But Washington Post with Jeff Bezos at the helm with lots of money to spend on things didn't want to spend the money on it.
Well, money, and then there's political pressure. You know, CBS network television news certainly has been in the spotlight of late because of heavy, and I think rightly so, suspicions that the Trump White House is weighing too heavily now on editorial decisions that CBS television news is making. Is that a contributing factor to the demise of CBS radio news? I don't see the direct line there, but I don't know. Do you? Maybe you do. I don't. But maybe there is.
Not to the extent of the influence that television has. And I'll tell you why. Because Donald Trump watches TV. I don't ever hear of Donald Trump listening to news radio. I don't hear of him really listening to any talk radio at all. If he mentions anything in the audio realm, it's a podcaster. And
well, you know what? It's easier, Rob, if you're sitting there in the White House munching on Big Macs, as the president is prone to do
with the ketchup.
With the ketchup, it's easier to kind of be fixated on the TV screen while you're munching down than to somehow just listen to the radio while you're eating. It just seems like it's more, watching and eating seem to go together better than listening and eating. Anyway, that's my Trump theory of media consumption. That would be a good book, wouldn't it? The Trump
It
theory.
would be a good book. And as someone who has interviewed Donald Trump quite a few times in your past, you know more about him than I do. Taking everything that you have said in today's
you don't want to take everything I said. You just
Charles, it seems to me your attitude is CBS News Radio going away on the 22nd, whenever, is something that's dying that will not be replaced, and that overall the broadcasting industry, especially radio broadcasting, is heading into a darker time and there is no light at the end of the tunnel. Is that the gist of your attitude about all this?
I would say that there's no tunnel. So they can't, it's hard to have no light at the end of something that doesn't.
It's not even in a tunnel anymore.
There's no tunnel. I think that radio news, it has been dying. I mean, and when I say dying, I'm just talking in numbers. Same as newspapers. So it's not just
shrinking.
It's shrinking. Well, which is shrinking sometimes is another word for dying. Healthy things tend to grow, not to an excessive degree, but they do tend to grow. Unhealthy things tend to shrink. So, radio news departments across the country have definitely been shrinking, or have now shrunk to the point where they are non-existent. It's not a good sign that the radio network that basically created modern day broadcasting news will also cease to exist. These are not individually or collectively signs of a fundamentally healthy business. It's just not. And to think otherwise is being in a state of denial, which is almost as bad as being, say, in the state of New Jersey. It's the same thing.
I think radio missed the boat way back when in not seeing the future and not embracing digital and podcast. But that's an easy opinion to have, 2020 hindsight. I don't think radio can pivot to embracing that enough to survive. What do you think?
Well, I know they're all trying, right? I mean, they're trying to get their stuff out on social media to varying degrees of success. It depends on how much people you have, how much emphasis a particular place puts on digital communications. Some are doing it, and some are doing it very well, and many are trying to do it, and some have actually decided not to, that their business is fundamentally a broadcasting business, and so they will, kind of go down with the ship, so to speak. and continue to do what they've been doing and let the chips fall. And that's now, I think, what was it? Two things in a row that are what's the word for it? What's the word I'm looking for? That are cliches. Yes, cliches in a row.
Yeah. And here we are, former radio guys doing a podcast.
Well, here we are, two cliches.
Yes, we are two cliches.
Wait a minute. I just had a brainstorm. Why we should call this podcast, instead of Archer and Feldman, we should just call it Two Cliches.
Two cliches. And the world, Charles, needs more old white guys telling everyone what they think.
Yeah,
I think there's a real need for that in the world. That is a need that is not being met, and we're here to do that.
No, we've messed up the world far too much already.
So. We're done. Someone else can have a chance. Aliens, let the dolphins do it. Well, moving ahead on this podcast, we are going to be speaking with guests. Charles and I are going to be speaking about what's happening in broadcasting, and not just broadcasting, but media in general, because now media is everything. It's podcasting, it's digital, it's live streaming, it's videos, it's audio podcasts. And we are going to be talking to some of the movers and shakers and people that had a big say in that as we move ahead and continue doing this little thing that we call Two Cliches, otherwise known as Archer and Feldman. And Charles, thank you so much for doing this with me. I really do appreciate it. We had a lot of fun back in our day as a host of KNX In Depth, and when we had the afternoon news on KNX, the team of us, we worked so well together, and we all had very different styles. A listener could tell who was talking at any given moment, and I think you brought some much needed intelligence and gravitas to what I brought to it, which was, hell, I don't know.
Well, I thank you for that. And remember what I said at the very beginning about the nature of people who make decisions.
Even on this podcast, there is a 50 to 100% chance that one of us is the stupid one.
Or both.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 2 of Archer and Feldman. Good night and good luck, CBS News Radio. We will see you next time.
Archer and Feldman is an independent production. Share this podcast with your friends. And don't miss the next episode with Rob Archer and Charles Feldman.